Foster care in America. Foster care seems to be an issue that people sympathize with, but few people are willing to be concerned enough to act upon. There are horror stories, and they are real, but they seem to overshadow the fact that the majority of these kids are healthy and in the right environment can grow to become happy, well-adjusted, productive members of our society. According to child welfare foster care statistics, approximately 750,000 children are in foster care this year. That's an increase from 600,000 in just 2004. Of that, roughly 70%, roughly 425,000, were removed from their homes, from their parents, and put into foster care by the Department of Children and Families. Roughly 30% of that in 2004 was as a result of being placed in the juvenile justice system. And those statistics rose greatly in 2009 to 525 because of DCF removal, and then 225 in 2009 because of juvenile justice. Today I hope to inform you about the realities as well as the myths concerning foster care children, so as to offer adoption as a viable solution to decrease the number of children currently being housed in the foster care system. First, I'd like to discuss the different reasons that children are being placed in foster care, as described by a website entitled Foster Care: Social Issues Affecting Children and Their Families. One of the reasons is parental neglect. Many of these children are in the system due to parental neglect, parental drug abuse, poor parenting, and generational family dysfunction. A lot of them are third and fourth generations in foster care. Another reason is abuse. Many of these children are in foster care due to abuse. They're removed for a variety of different types of abuses, but mainly it's physical and sexual in nature that DCF will come in and remove them. And then lastly, they're orphaned because their parents are incarcerated. Children of incarcerated parents' fact sheet says that the children of incarcerated mothers are more likely to remain in foster care until they actually age out. And then a lot of them are orphans. There's a way we know that term to be, to mean because of death, either by illness or violence. Jennifer Johnson states that children who are in the foster care system due to parental death or illness suffer from grief and loss, and then have to cope with being in a foster care environment. And lastly, just simple abandonment. Some of these children come home from school and their parents never show up again. Or a lot of them were abandoned at birth, and they end up in foster care systems for a variety of reasons: healthcare reasons, physical disabilities. They're abandoned. And now I'd like to discuss some of the results of living in the foster care system long term, which majority of these children do. The article Foster Care: Social Issues Affecting Children and Their Families describes some results of long-term foster care in her article, Children and Their Families. The emotional problems. Many of the children who spend a great amount of time in foster care develop an attachment disorder, and they're never able to fully develop the ability to properly socialize or to bond. Many of these children act out violently or criminally and become a part of the juvenile justice system. Most of them have very low self-esteem. Then there's a repetition factor. There are many children who are second and third generations in the foster care system. Many, because they spend so much time in so many homes, never receive adequate and consistent counseling, and they'll often repeat the same abuse that was done to them to their children. But adoption is certainly not the only solution. Reunification is a solution. All of you know that I am an adoption advocate. I'm a children's advocate, and one of my situations with my twins, technically, I feel that if their birth mom had had an advocate, they would have never made it in the system. It was simply her neglect on fulfilling a prescription. But with that came a unification profile plan that she failed because she was a child, and there was no one there to support her and push her. So as she failed one case plan and another, and just snowballed till her children became available for adoption. So that's one solution. But today I wanted to discuss the very viable solution of adoption. The article, The Adopted Child, states that adopting a child from the foster care system is not as hard as many people believe. Fees, for instance. There is no fee associated with adopting through the state. And in addition, there are tax breaks and subsidies to help support adopted children who were previously in foster care. Now, the requirements are not as stringent as people believe. The age minimums for a person to adopt or the limitations varies from state to state, but it's quite liberal. For the most part, single or married people may adopt. And in some states, it is illegal for persons of a homosexual relationship to legally adopt, but not to foster. Adoption through the state does require that you attend some sort of training. Usually it's a 4 to 6 week increments. But the training is very valuable as it helps you to prepare to care for a child who's coming out of the foster care system. Although there are many who are healthy, there are effects of being in that type of home. You have, because foster care system as a whole was set up to be a short-term situation. It was only set up to care for a child for a season, if you will. These parents have set themselves up mentally and emotionally not to go all out, not to open their hearts completely and treat these children like they're natural children, which means they're getting surface love. And to get that in 6, 7, 8 homes throughout their lifetimes, they're going to be jaded. So the training helps you deal with their emotional issues that are totally correctable. There are some myths involved in adoption with the state. So I want to discuss some myths versus reality. It is a myth to believe that you don't have a choice in the child that you adopt. It's called matching. Most states offer several opportunities for you to meet these children who are available for adoption through adoption fairs or art galleries. And at some point in the process, there's even a chance for overnight visitations prior to adoption. It's also a myth to believe that all children from foster care are unhealthy or mentally unstable. There are many special needs children in the foster care system, that's true. However, there are just as many healthy children who have no genetic mental illness. There would be the issue of the circumstance of their being placed in foster care to begin with, hence the training. But with counseling and love, it can be overcome. It has always been a myth that the adoptions are overturned. People are afraid to adopt because they think the real parents are going to come back in and swoop in. But once a child in the foster care system legally becomes available for adoption, that means that the parents' parental rights have been terminated or they voluntarily surrendered them, as in the case of incarceration. Many of them will terminate their rights voluntarily so that they can be adopted. So they have no legal basis to stop the adoption or to have it overturned. It's also a myth that adopted children can't be as loved as a natural child. As I said before, you all know I am an adoptive parent and I have no natural children, so I really couldn't even imagine how I could possibly love a child more than I love mine. It has to be physically impossible. I consider their being adopted relevant only as to how they came to being mine, much the same way a natural parent would view a child's birth, like cesarean versus a natural delivery. It's also a myth to believe that if you're not in a position to adopt, that you can't be of some sort of help, and that's a myth. There are different types of programs where you can mentor a foster child. In many states, there are grandparent adoptions. That means the child doesn't reside with you, but you act like a grandparent. They come over for Christmas and birthdays. You go see their plays and their football games, just to have that support system. And then there's always financial donations that can be made, as well as just giving of your time, going down to the foster care homes and or the hospitals and embracing and being involved. In conclusion, I wanted to say that we all have to deal with foster care children in our society in one way or another. It's just a fact. Either by experiencing the joy of adopting and raising them to be productive members of society or encountering them in some other way that may be destructive in society. It could be the difference of that person raised in the foster care system being the one that just carjacked you or being the firefighter that just rescued you. So everyone has an encounter with someone who's experienced foster care either directly or indirectly. And I just ask that you take interest and promote adoption as a viable solution. Thank you.
Whoa.